A short video discussing how museums consider their location and their institution when choosing how to interpret objects. So in museums, interpretation is anything that to do with display or to do with any information given with the objects, be that text, video or audio guides, anything like that. So the first thing we really consider is the type of institution that's doing the display. So it depends on the focus of the institution, what they're aiming to tell people when they come in. So you'll find different places can display the same object very, very differently with different information given depending on what they're trying to do with it. An example, we've got a few examples here. The first one is two paintings by J.M.W. Turner. So one here is on the left is a National Gallery displaying a piece of work by Turner. Now, the National Gallery would have collected this because it's considered of national importance. So it's considered worth having and maintaining for the nation on their behalf. The one on the right is at a big country estate in Cheshire, and they have it because Turner stayed there and painted it for the owner. So it has a direct link to the property, it's of the property, and it's stayed in the family right up until the collection was bought out. They'll display them very differently. As you can see in the art gallery, it is on a very plain background and just has a small text panel next to it explaining the context, who it's by, what it's of, and why it's important. On the right, in the country house, it is displayed alongside the family's collection in its original setting in their drawing room, and any interpretation given with it will be about the connection of the painting, the painter, and the place. So, generally speaking, people will be told that Turner visited the estate, that he really enjoyed fishing, and that's why he painted the lake and gave it to the owner. So, very different interpretations for two paintings by the same artist. Another thing to consider is art galleries versus museums. So, modern art galleries tend to have very plain, very clean walls, generally white, because their aim is to discuss the aesthetic nature of the paintings, what they look like, what this means, and what the artist was trying to represent visually. On the right, we've got modern art displayed in a museum. And the point in this museum is not necessarily the aesthetic value of the art, although that's important, it's to do with the historical context of the art being made. So in this case, it was an art movement, and it discussed the time period, why that art movement took place in that time period, and what that meant for the world. Because of this, the walls are generally coloured, it's displayed very differently, and there's generally more interpretation given with them. Again, another difference here, this is a natural history museum in America against a national collection in Scotland. Both these images contain T-Rex skeletons or models of T-Rex skeletons, but in a very different context. The American Museum of Natural History's interest is in the natural history, in the science behind it, and therefore it's displayed alongside other remains of similar creatures from the same time period, with the information being given about that time period. On the right, it's a national collection, so it's again a collection that was collected to be maintained for the sake of the nation, and here it's displayed alongside anything that's even thematically similar. So you've got a T-Rex, but you've also got an elephant, a camel, some dolphins, a shark. Anything that's even remotely linked to the T-Rex is all in the one display because the museum isn't focused on that. It's focused on various things. In the same museum, they've also got Formula One cars, they've got trains, they've got a clock from the 19th century. It's not about the core of the collection, and therefore it's more thematic than specific. So the next thing museums consider when we're giving any interpretation is the audience. Who's going to be reading it and why? Different things affect what we want to write. So your average audience age, if you're visited by a lot of schools, you generally write your interpretation at a lower reading age. You also explain things more thoroughly and in simpler language. Also, prior knowledge is really important. So A lot of museums, if they're putting on a new exhibition, will do what we call formative evaluation. So this normally takes the place of a questionnaire, and they'll ask visitors to the museum months before the exhibition is due to be planned what they know about what the exhibition's on. What level of knowledge can you expect people to walk in with, and therefore what do you have to explain and what you don't have to explain. All of this affects what you're going to tell people. So if the event your exhibition is going to be on, people have very little knowledge, you'll have to do a lot more work in your interpretation to explain the event or the objects there. You can't expect them to already know things and therefore gloss over anything. It also means generally there'll be less information in the exhibition. It won't be as in-depth. It'll be on a simpler level. One of the things you have to be really careful with is how we exploit the trust we have in museums. Museums are trusted by people. Here on the graph, out of all of the organisation types that were assessed in America, consistently museums and art galleries had the highest level of public trust, more so than charity organisations, state organisations, newspapers. Museums were significantly more trusted as credible. And that's very important to consider when you're writing your interpretation, because it's then your responsibility to maintain and earn that trust. It shouldn't be exploited. Everything you say should be well sourced in order to ensure that we're not exploiting what's already there from the public. So all these things affect what and how museums write their interpretation based upon. Okay, so there's also a list of sources here at the end that we used, and a bit of information about myself.